So for the aspiring founders, can we talk about the salient misconceptions of starting a company? What's the reality versus the myth?
Yeah, the first thing is I've done a lot of things because if it's not obvious, I'm old. So that also that is an important point. So I think probably one of the first misconceptions is related to that. Experience matters. I think there is certainly at YC, you evangelize this view that anybody can do entrepreneurship at any point with just enough ambition, and that is not true. And the example that I would use here is, you guys know this weird stat that if you're over 7 feet tall in the U.S., there's a 17% chance you'll be in the NBA. So roughly so you hit 7 feet, 1 out of 5 chance you're going to be a millionaire throwing a leather ball through a hoop, for entertainment purposes. And that's kind of mind-boggling, right? But if you asked me, hey, Qasar, who here is going to be an NBA player? And I would say, anyone who's 6'5", stand up because you have a better shot. The same thing exists with entrepreneurship, but it's just not obvious. It's not this physical indicator of who's actually well formed for that specific task. And so the first thing is the way that but unlike being tall, you can actually get better. So experience is a really important component there. And the misconception, I think, is that if you're not starting a company at 22 or 25 or 27, that you've kind of lost the narrative. The reality is at YC, the median age is 30, so half the founders getting funded at YC, which is a seed fund, are going to be over 30. And then if you actually look at the top YC companies, you hear about the Patrick and John Carlson's Stripe. You hear about Alex Wang at Scale. But it's the German proverb, the exception proves the rule. The rule is actually people with experience and a network and understanding hiring, firing, these things matter. There's a recent Stanford graduate. So at Applied, we recruit, this is for me also a recruiting event. At Stanford, at Applied, we recruit from Stanford, Berkeley, and MIT. Specifically because these schools, there's just raw intelligence and they like startups. And we had a recent Stanford grad, the company's 7 years old, as mentioned. Stanford grad who'd been with us a couple of years and said, he's, like I say, 24 years old or so. He said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to start a company because, and I said, and this is not self-serving, I'm very earnest, I don't think you're ready to do this. There's a huge difference. If you're a chief executive officer, that means you have to know all of those functions really well. So it's not enough that you just know you're a good software engineer or you're good at sales or marketing or HR or there's a dozen different functions that you have to really, really know. So this Stanford alum says, but you've said in talks that you can't learn being a founder other than just doing it. And the analogy that I used is me and Peter Ludwig's my co-founder. It's Peter and I are standing at the foothill, at the base of Everest. We're at base camp and we're ready and we know the challenge that is in front of us. We're sober and we're aware. And you're walking up with flip-flops, and you can't say, "Well, it's just about climbing a mountain, right? And if I fail, it's okay." So there's a window you're trying to hit. You also don't want to wait too long, because if you wait too long, the momentum of life takes over. You fall into the American system, which is you buy a house and you get a car, and this debt takes over, and these obligations take over. Relationships happen and kids happen, and suddenly you're not in the ability to go start a company, which is a fairly high risk venture. Generally speaking, for people in this room, it's not that high risk because venture capitalists are going to give you money. So if it doesn't work out, you're not going to be homeless. You just don't make a return for some rich people. So generally the risk is lower, so what's the risk when you're 35 to start a company? It's ego and it's opportunity cost. So at that point, you're like, hey, I can do a bunch of things. And the market actually doesn't care if you have experience. So you're taking the same amount of risk as somebody who's 25, who has a lot less knowledge and less. So you have to find this window. So what I'm saying here is there's misconceptions all around from your experience to timing, and you should be extremely careful in reading startup entertainment, TechCrunch, Hacker News, whatever your fill is, and extrapolating and saying, well, that's because I've heard lots of young founders do it out of Stanford, I should immediately do it. It's you should really objectively say, can I lead a group of people to build a business? And that's what we're talking about. And if we're all on the same page, a business is revenue minus expenses equals profits. You need to know all those components. It's not just I have a good idea, let's do it.